Okay, welcome everybody to this May edition of Be the Action. Today we are joined by Alison Watson, and in just a moment I'm going to hand you over to Maria, who's going to take the rest of the call today. For those of you who've never joined us before, I've just got a little bit of housekeeping. My name's Catherine from an organisation called Built Environment Skills in Schools. Maria and I set up Be the Action at the beginning of the year to celebrate the change makers in construction, the people who are really getting things done and making a difference in the sector. We've had some phenomenal calls so far, and if you've missed any of them, please jump over onto our YouTube channel, onto our Facebook page, or onto our podcast. All of those are Be the Action. For today's call, in the audience, so if you wonder nobody's responding to you, it's because your microphones are off. But if you have any questions, on the screen in front of you, you'll see just the second button in from the left is a chat box. If you've got any technical issues, do just pop something up on there. Alternatively, I will be running the Twitter account during this call, and that is BE_theAction. If you've got any problems, any queries, please do tweet me and I will get that sorted. If I haven't said it before, I'd just like to say how very grateful we are to all of the people who join us for these calls and to the speakers who participate. This is the start of something. It might not be ultimately where it ends up, but Maria and I were really passionate about really giving a voice and a platform to people doing incredible things in the sector. After today's call, if you miss anything, if you've got any queries, any problems, we will ask Alison to sort of answer any questions on an ongoing basis, perhaps on our Facebook page, and you can join us there. Again, that's Be the Action. But you'll also be able to get the podcast of this up on our podcast platform and up on iTunes. We get a lot of media coverage and write-up from this as well from a couple of industry publications, so please do support them. You'll see that on Twitter and on LinkedIn and on Facebook. So without further ado, let me hand you over to Maria, who's going to take today's call.
Hi everybody, so it's Maria Coulter here from Construction Coach, and thanks for listening in. We're really excited to have Alison Watson today, who's the Managing Director of Class of Your Own. We've seen Alison speak at various events, and Alison is very passionate about the industry and about bringing change. And we did sort of have a little pre-call beforehand, and Alison was saying, well, you know, do you want me to sort of calm things down a little bit in the call? And we were saying, no, absolutely not. Lay it all on the table, and obviously we can mute any swear words afterwards as well, but I'm sure Alison won't do that. So Alison is the Managing Director of Class of Your Own, and I know that Class of Your Own was started in 2009, and you do built environment student engagement programs, and that's in schools and colleges. And that includes the design, engineering, construct qualification. So Alison's got some slides that she's going to share with us as well. And that's the first question I really wanted to ask is, you know, what brought about Class of Your Own? What particular problem did you want to solve when you started this? So I'm going to pass the presenter role over to Alison to show some slides.
Okay. Thanks, Maria. Thanks, Catherine. Really pleased to be here. I know pinning me down in the last few months has been difficult, so everybody knows I'm everywhere. But yeah, I think it goes back to realising that as an adult in the built environment, nothing changed in 20 odd years since I was at school. And writing a programme, I was always of the opinion, because I met lots and lots of children when I was working as a surveyor on Building Schools for the Future programme, I realised as a surveyor you can either be part of the problem or part of the solution. And my reaction to meeting lots of children and realising that they still didn't know anything more than I did when I was 16 about the built environment, despite this fantastic new building programme going on just over the hoardings with, you know, all these engineers and surveyors and architects, and the kids just basically saw loads of guys in yellow doing things with their hands and just assuming it was nothing to do with them. And I certainly realised that unless this was a subject that was aspirational, the children looked, skywards towards construction without using a pun, that this, an industry of really great people, really great opportunities. Our industry was always going to be dumbed down as, you're good with your hands during construction. And I think the day that I heard one of the kids who came on this program, which I'll give you a little bit of history to later, say that he wants to be a bricklayer. That was wonderful, because most people who go into bricklaying is because they're told there's nothing else for people like you, who maybe aren't, our pupils and so on. So I think that was really an attempt to widen or broaden the scope of the built environment and say, actually, all these stories you don't know about because nobody tells you. And I think just this slide just kind of tells you, in sort of 8 key features as to why deck matters in schools, and why it was so important that people like me supported these children, and particularly these teachers. And that we'll change anything by just doing the same old. And for me, touring a kid around a building site was never going to solve the problem. And in fact, almost reinforce that image that we're trying to not get away from, but just say, actually, there's more to it than those guys over there who just appear on the face of it to be, slapping one brick on top of another. So this was my way of really, really integrating it, embedding it within the curriculum, and more than anything, exciting teachers about what we do. Because if we get the teachers excited, and in fairness to the teachers who generally come into schools with, they've been in school, they go to university, they go back into school, is it fair that we can blame teachers for not knowing what they don't know? They never, very few teachers have got a built environment background. In FE colleges, I tend to find that the tutors have been more site-based. So it's entirely forgivable. Just don't know our industry. And again, as I said before, just keeping on the same old of saying, okay, corporate social responsibility, let's get a crowd of kids and talk to them about how wonderful our built environment is in an assembly. There was never a chance for the children to go day 2 and say, I heard that woman yesterday talking about land surveying, I heard that guy talking about civil engineering. I want to be like that. What can you tell me? And Mr. Smith, the teacher, could only respond with, well, if you study something, craft-based, or they didn't have a compelling answer for the kids, and that's wrong. There's something immoral about, sat in a maths classroom and not being able to understand when you'll ever use the mathematics that you learn, when you'll ever apply the science, when you'll ever use Newton's laws of motion, and so on and so forth. And I think we have an obligation as people who use the science in maths all the time. We have an obligation to help teachers understand how that can be applied, so it suddenly becomes fun and useful instead of just a load of numbers and letters on a whiteboard. So that's why I started writing Deck, and I approached quite a few people in the industry. I'm going to give a big shout out to a gentleman called Eddie Murphy, who at the time was a technical manager or director rather for Mott MacDonald, and he and I used to sit and drink coffee and put the world to rights. He's big on sustainability, as I was. Really giving a damn about the planet other than recycling your Coke can. And I used to sit down with Eddie and say, I'm going to write this stuff, and I've got this ideas, and blah blah. I wrote the Deck program, and then Eddie said to me, enough's enough, Ali, we can help enormously. Come down and see my boss. And so after years of bending Eddie's ear, he finally put me on a Dragon's Den almost to Keith Howells, who's the chairman of Mott Mac. And Keith was, he's been an amazing guy who's just said, what, this working with schools is really critical. We're not getting the kids through, and this was, 5 years ago. What can we do to help? And I said, well, instead of concentrating on doing these one-hit wonders, these assemblies and everything else, adopt a school. Just work with one school, and maybe another regional office will work with another. And if you can influence other organisations to follow what you're doing, so somebody else works closely with a school. So Langerock came on board. Even companies like Topcon. So Topcon, I used to work with them years ago. Topcon are a multinational company who, they make the surveying instruments. And for me as a surveyor, putting lasers into school, putting measurement data into school is fundamental. We use angles and distances, we use measurement, we use math, we use Pythagoras theorem. Topcon came on board and said, we'll supply you with some instruments, we'll supply you with some expertise, we'll get people in the classroom. And it's just grown beyond all expectation. What started as just a little northwest thing, now we're in England, we're in Scotland, about to be in Wales, Northern Ireland, Republic of Ireland, and all because people sat down and had a cup of coffee, and I got this is what I believe is wrong with industry across to them, and they believe in me, and they believe in the programme. And it's almost viral now because people now ring us instead of me having to ring them and plead with people to please work closer with the school, develop a relationship. Now the phone calls are coming in. So we seem to be getting there. I think we're getting there. Thanks to some extraordinary people.
Fantastic. So I'm just checking that everybody can hear me still. So you can hear me, Alison, can't you?
Yes, completely.
Okay, brilliant. Okay. So explain to me how it works then. So you talked about how it all started and you talked about the qualification. So talk to me about how you adopt a school and what the process is and how it all works.
It's dead easy actually, because we're not asking people to stand on a stage in front of 300 kids and talk about my aspirational pathway into civil engineering. It's go into a classroom and be a civil engineer and work on a piece of civil engineering curriculum. So the Adopt a School program basically is a teacher training program. I work with teachers, I work with universities and work with students for 3 years before I wrote Design Engineer Construct, with the support of Liverpool John Moores University School of Education. I got to understand the challenges of education before I ever started writing programs, because the one thing, there's an awful lot of blame for education these days. When the reports come out around skills, you've got the Pearson report comes out every year, with the CBI, and everybody's bleating around skills, and schools aren't producing the kids that we need. And that's really unfair, actually, because school teachers are up against it. They have to get on the table points, they have to get through barriers and be get league tables for every GCSE. If it's not a GCSE, it's crazy doing it because they don't get any points for it. So, the government holds schools under serious pressure to deliver. So even before you start writing a program, you've got to consider, is this going to be acceptable on school curriculum? So, again, working very closely with the Department for Education, making sure that the equivalency of what is it, whether we like it or not, a vocational program. I know Langerock have recently called for DEC to become an A-level and GCSE, but the problem you've got is that the government stance towards education at the moment is that it's either academic or vocational, although vocational has now been rebranded technical. And all the T-levels that are coming out to support apprenticeships are great, but I think the realization that most kids will be in school, and most kids will stay in school at post-16 if they want the higher level careers, because transforming, you can't overnight change the way that people think about apprenticeships and so on. And even though I strongly believe in apprenticeships, and my God, our kids are going into apprenticeships and doing some amazing stuff now, and I'll maybe give you a couple of case studies later. Really honing down into what are the issues in education to overcome before we launch ourselves in there as built environment people. So one of the things that came around was the importance of people from the built environment in terms of student engagement, really working closely to help the teacher understand what we do. And often I think the problem with student engagement is it's done more of a kind of corporate social responsibility meets careers advice and guidance, where there'll be something rearranged with the school to have a workshop day or an enterprise day or something like that. It's about the children instead of about the teachers. and lots and lots of good stuff goes on. But as I say, the teacher generally isn't involved because an enterprise day is generally coordinated by another, and the teachers in STEM subjects, in English and geography, don't get a look in. So how can we develop a program where built environment people from engineers, architects, surveyors, construction managers, the whole plethora of people involved in construction can actually work closely with a teacher to help inspire them so that they can deliver a program in the classroom and feel confident that they know their stuff. So the Adopt School program was really around individual organisations and multidisciplinary representation, not delivering the curriculum because that's always going to be done by the teacher, but the teacher along the different phases of the curriculum. So, for example, in the Level 1 program, Children Design a Mini School, it was written originally for the Building Schools for the Future program. Children were being asked to make commentary on £20 million school builds without having any introduction, without having any knowledge of the industry, and just being asked, what would you like in your new school? And the children, without this introduction to what a new school actually was a very sort of, high-performing building, would just come out with little things like, I don't know, a new sports pitch would be nice. I don't know, it would be cool if we had a cyber cafe, and so on, and new tech. And that's all well and good, but the children were never given access on a daily basis. What school build was going on to all these incredible people who work from trade to craft to technical to professional and so on. And even at handover stage, generally the main contractor would walk away. Any opportunity to work with anyone was just gone. It was just completely lost. So the idea of Adopt School is that it's supporting the curriculum from concept design, planning, all the sustainability. We have to meet BREEAM standards as designers, engineers, and construction people. If kids could understand schools in terms of sustainability and how they could influence the world, never mind their school, by thinking sustainably and thinking about how the energy performance of the school ultimately impacted carbon, and how it was important that their footprint on the world was tiny, instead of a great big welly into high carbon instead of low carbon or zero carbon and so on, and having children understand the complexities of industry, but from an 11 to 14-year-old is often around sustainable thinking. And I think there's a lack of understanding. The directives of sustainability that exist in every corporate now. It used to be Directors of Corporate Social Responsibility. It seems to be now Directors of Sustainability. But how sustainable are we as an industry? And children really, really buy into saving the planet. I think children having their place in the world and understanding that how they can impact the big industry globally, and how they can get jobs and how they can, raise themselves out of poverty. We have poverty in this country, and the built environment, every child has a building that they relate to. They can not just be, living in a house, they can be thinking about designing houses, building houses and everything else. So I noticed Sue just mentioned about social responsibility. If children can get jobs with this great industry that exists through a school curriculum, but really see where their pathway is, it can really, really get them up the social mobility ladder. And we've got children now who've, lived on some of the poorest estates in the country, who had no aspiration, they had no role models. Parents were, third generation unemployed, and they didn't want to be. Sometimes it wasn't their fault that they got into this. It was just a trap of, the cycle of employment. So Atkins come along, an amazing organisation called Ingleton Wood. They come along and they pump their expertise into school. And some of these children have role models as often as they like. And even Ingleton Wood have now recruited two of the guys, to the students down in Clacton Coastal Academy. Atkins has taken on project managers for trainees. And what happens, of course, is that suddenly that child who, has always said, Dad, you're unemployed, tell me about, where's a decent job, and Dad doesn't have a lot to say. Well, can you imagine these children when Dad's a project manager for Atkins or is a building surveyor for Ingleton Wood, they've got stories to tell their kids, and you break that cycle of unemployment, and those kids will not live on that really deprived state anymore. They'll move up the social ladder, and their children will understand what the built environment can do for them and their children's children and so on. I just think the whole approach has to be different. And that's totally what the school program does, getting real people in very real ways into schools to develop real relationships.
Sounds fantastic. And how has everything been going with this? What success have you had? I mean, I know you talked about some case studies and things like that.
We've had some great successes in teaching and learning, and one of the things around teaching excellence is really, really key, because I'm just going to move down a couple of slides. These teachers are phenomenal. So we've got there Clapton Coastal, King Egbert, St Ambrose, 3 schools that I can fit on the slide. So we're now breeding a whole new generation of teachers, and we're calling them, ironically, I was sat with Peter Hansford a few years ago and chatting to Peter about the importance of concentrating on teaching and learning and raising achievements through raising teachers' expectations and so on. And he said, there are specialist teachers for geography, there's specialist teachers for just about every subject, but built environment specialisms just don't exist. And Peter was really, really. He said, well, what would you call a tech teacher? I said, well, it's a built environment specialist teacher. It's that simple. I can remember Peter laughing at me and saying, yeah, the best teachers in the world are built environment specialist teachers, and it's quite ironic that actually, because they understand project-based learning, they understand where STEM fits into everything. Science, technology, engineering, maths. These guys understand it. They're delivering a project. And where it all started in terms of successes. Design technology was a subject where you make key rings, you make pencil cases, you make bird boxes. It's product design. So a product is a building as well. So if they can do a key ring, they can sure as hell do a building. It's just a bigger product. And the design technology faculties of different schools really embrace this, because the one thing they get is project-based learning. It's funny because over years, project-based learning has been really, really dumbed down by different governments. It's in fashion, then it's not. Fashion, then it's not, and now we hear it's in fashion again. And I think we've had so much focus on passing exams, academic success, how many GCSEs have you got, and this is why there's no skills coming through, because children can pass an exam. Can they shake hands with you when you come in the room? No. Can they articulate a design? No. Can they give you eye contact when they're speaking to you? No. Because all these skills should be embedded in the room. A lot of it is about manners. I can remember when I was brought up, it was a very simple thing for me to look at people when I'm speaking to them, to shake their hand, to be able to present myself. I didn't go to a public school where this is just a normal way of life. I went to the biggest comprehensive school in Sheffield. I was just a normal kid from a working class family. My dad was a stoneman. My father passed away at 13 years old. My mum got remarried to a joiner. And yet, all the way through my childhood, I happened to be in the top set. I was doing very well at school, but all the way through my childhood, nobody talked to me about the construction industry. I got through 2 dads in construction. It just wasn't something you talked about. So even with influence, because I was, good at maths at school, it was immediately, you're going to go to university, you're going to study something with maths. And nobody told me what to study. So I think the successes has been in really challenging the norm for design technology, challenging the norm for applied maths, getting just to understand their place in the world in terms of influence and how magnificent they really are, if only we gave them credit for it, instead of constantly bashing them. However, where the failures are is because so few schools see the construction as aspirational, they send them off to college to get them out of school, not to keep them in, believe you me. because they're targeted with all these performance tables and league table points and how many GCSEs and everything else, 50 schools in England is not good. There are 3,500, in fact there's more than that. But it's not good that only 50 schools get this. And when we've got children who are improving their maths, improving their literacy through the built environment, and the government doesn't get it, applied learning is so very necessary. You have to be able to say, C squared equals A squared plus B squared. Why does that matter? And everybody, every bricklayer in the country knows that that is setting out. That is the big square. That is making sure that that house that they're marking out before they go and put the bricks on the ground is Pythagoras theorem. And they don't call it Pythagoras theorem. They call it setting out. But no kid in school has ever said to me, apart from DEC students, I will use Pythagoras theorem in my life. It's just not something they do. So I think empowering the teachers has been amazing. And even meeting with Hardik Begul, Hardik, I think he's now got an OBE for his contributions to education. He sits in the Department for Education. And when I was trying to get the DFE to understand why something this program was so important in terms of improving literacy and numeracy, I actually gave the best example I could find for a GCSE maths question that was around Pythagoras theorem and application. And this was basically, a ladder leans against a wall. It hits the wall at 4 meters, it's 2 meters away from the bottom of the wall. What is the length of the ladder? That's about as built environment as it could get. And I put Hardik Begul and I said, can you do this, Hardik? This guy had a pure maths degree. And he laughed at me and said, well, of course I can. I said, that's really, really good, because C squared equals A squared plus B squared. That little square, that little 2, becomes a times 2 by the time they're in year 9. Because they learn it for that period of their lives and then they forget it. And because they never apply it, they never use it again. And I've got children in year 9, which is 13, 14 years old, and in year 11, who are still saying, remind me what again? Remind me what square root is again? Because they never use it. And then we get, bricklayers are supposed to be, not very good at maths and good with their hands. Yeah, every bricklayer I know knows C squared equals A squared plus B squared. So fathom that.
So what you're saying is, for this to work, so the schools and the employers, like the contractors, the companies, have got to come together, because you're wanting organisations to adopt a school, aren't you? Because that's where the funding for this comes from. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. There's one thing that schools can't do is fund stuff, and even more so now. We've all heard about the latest funding cuts, and the government say that schools are overfunded, the schools say they're underfunded. Whatever the case is, I'm not in the thick of it with schools, and I can certainly see that in terms of information technology, for instance, we're having to beg, like McDonald's, Topcon, Costain, please give us your tech, because schools can't afford to buy it. And we're getting second-hand tech. Topcon have just donated a significant amount of survey equipment that we can distribute around the schools so that children will understand the application of measurements and angles and distances and so on. Because schools can't afford to do these things. And even putting a teacher training plan in place, to have, we work with a fantastic company called White Frog, Paul Wally, Peter Routledge, heroes of our time in terms of, understanding BIM and training and everything else. These guys need to exist. There needs to be facilitation. There needs to be people paid to come into schools, because the big boys, like constantly hearing about what weights do and what BAM do and so on. They can afford to do corporate social responsibility. Can afford to throw thousands of pounds at corporate social responsibility. What about the guy who lives on the end of the street, who's an actual, well, like myself, a land surveyor with a very, very small company with a niche expertise? They can't just afford to be a STEM ambassador and go time and time again into one school, because time is money. And the frustration again is the main contractors hanging on to supply chain. They've got a brilliant supply chain, but nobody ever brings in supply chain. It's about, how many How many outputs have we had? Have we hit our KPIs? Have we, you know, delivered on the tender for all the community benefits that we promised? So a lot of it, frustratingly, seems to be around, you know, win the bid, meet the tender, tick the box, when the fundamentals are is that people like these 3 teachers here exist and really, really need dedicated help. But unfortunately, again, it's the one thing with industry and schools coming together, but there needs to be a government agenda that allows that to happen and allows that to happen very, very well. And if you look at the new industrial strategy, this country, and I'm talking about UK, wants to be the centre of the universe. Theresa May put it out there herself. They want to be the centre of the universe in terms of being the best place to study science, technology, and engineering. And that's post-16, when they go to university, and we've got all the research and PhDs and everything else, it starts in secondary school. In fact, it starts in primary school. It probably starts in the womb. But I mean, my daughter was carried around an awful lot on surveys. But the fact is, we need to start younger. And I keep hearing all the time, must do more with schools, must do more with schools. But I still feel that tokenistic approach that, you know, we'll carry on doing the same. Well, we do loads with schools because we do loads of workshops and we get loads of people in built environments and open doors. You know, the open doors weekend is great, but it's a snapshot of time. And if you can't make it, or if you can't go there, or similarly, if you get back to school on a Monday morning and you say, I went to open doors, I saw this brilliant building project over the weekend. Now show me how to get there. It's still that problem of, because we're on the GCSE treadmill of having to tick boxes and how many exams can we study and A star to C and English baccalaureate, we're still not being given education like this. And even with industrial strategy, everything is post-16.
Mm.
How do they imagine that children just wake up on their 16th birthday and say, oh, you know what, I want to be a quantity surveyor because I had a dream last night and there was this vision of a QS. Not how it happens.
No, that's very true, and that's coming from a QS as well.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. I'm conscious of time, Alison, and I know we could talk for a long time about this because there's so much to say and there's so many messages to get out there. But you know, this needs to be upscaled. We need to be getting the messages out there to the companies and the schools. So what do we need to do to broaden your reach? Because you've said that, you know, you've got 50 schools on board at the moment. How do we expand that? What can we do to sort of get behind this?
I think it's the clients that's the problem, and I mean that with a big P, because if I could quote London Legacy Development Corporation, LLDC, when they're working on the Olympic Regeneration Programme, have made it mandatory that children have access to education like this. So, and if you look at the stuff that they're doing with digital skills down in London, on the Olympic Park, we've got, you know, people like Alison Morrison, Boyd, Balfour Beatty, the fantastic Bureau Happel, who I can't say enough about. You know, there's a few people in the world, Mott MacDonald, Bureau Happel, Topcon, Langer, you know, some really, really great organisations who've been working with us for a time. But the stance that LLDC has taken is that they are the clients. If you want to have a you have to get the Adopt a School programme into your school. You will work as a consortium and bring in on the next generation. And you know what? Even in the early days of that consortium, I keep seeing things on Twitter that's coming out of LLDC, and it's just phenomenal, the things that they're doing. HS2 could do the same. You know, all the major projects, the biggest major project from a client point of view, the government projects around school buildings. You know, we've got a school building programme going on. I remember the design director for the Education Funding Agency many years ago, in the days of BSF, when BSF was thrown out and it became the Priority School Building Programme. He actually said to me, Alison, if you thought there was ever time to do student engagement with BSF, Priority School Building Programme, on-site, off-site, quick as you can, get this box made, whether it's a big box or a little box that's called a school, there's going to be no time now. And the frustration that I have more than anything is that because you can't get into schools until the contractors won the tender, you lose all that opportunity to see the land surveying, geotechnical, design work, civil engineering side. The contractor comes on, does his normal package of school delivery, school engagement, and then they're gone within a year. So you never get to see the FMs, you never get to see anything beyond handover. You know, you never get to see building services engineers. Absolute heroes, you never get to see them. So to me, the client, whoever it may be, whether it's the MOJ, MOD, Department for Education, the client has to drive better behaviour and better programmes, and just not do the same old we were doing 10 years ago.
So, okay, so when you're talking about the clients, so you're talking about the likes of, you know, HS2 and people like that, but what about the individual contractors if they want to sort of get involved?
Well, again, contractors can get involved, and contractors do get involved, but sadly, again, you know, they sign up to a doctor's school and they're brilliant. They do a really great job well, most of them do a really great job, and those who aren't probably know what I'm talking about. But those who do a really, really great job, my appeal to them was make it more accessible for supply chain, because you've always got the same people taking the lead on a doctor's school and making it their CSR program and everything else. But when you look at the supply chain, how massive that is, and the access to people that we have who could help these teachers and particularly help these students, and ultimately when the main contractors moved on to the next job, we still got behind a very local supply chain that could recruit these students. Because from an employment point of view, it's probably going to be supply chain who recruit more than the main contractor. So it's, you know, what are main contractors doing to help their supply chain access things like this? And so I'm only hearing of the main adopters. So, you know, the main contractor doing all the work, we're putting all our engineers in, we're doing wonderful things, and they are. Take anything away from them. But where's the roofing specialist? Because when we talk about slopes and Sokotoa and all that kind of stuff, nobody does slopes better than a roofer. Where's the roofers in schools? Why are they? How are they being given a chance to do their bit for corporate social responsibility, and indeed meeting some, you know, fine young talent that they could recruit, particularly with the apprenticeship level being, you know, in the mix.
Yeah.
You know, there are apprentices out there. The one thing that I always said was that, you know, it's not a question of finding young talent for the apprenticeship levy and to meet the apprenticeship target. It's about finding the right fine young talent. And everybody's picking on our school kids now. Sainsbury's want them. The Bank of England wants them. The Citibank, the Intel, you know, they're all, these children are in a pot now with everybody saying, our apprenticeship program is amazing, come to us. And forgive me, when you've got people like British Aerospace, for example, showing a jet fighter, you know, come and be a BAE apprentice because this is a jet fighter. You know, the construction industry is still going, you know, we can't find apprentices, we can't find apprentices. And what are we doing to recruit them? I mean, there's a certain number of very, very, very large organisations who are year on year in the same, we can't get enough women in, we can't get this in, there's no children coming through, we've got, you know, so many jobs to fill, and yet we can't get them. Well, when you talk to a child, most of them are saying, I want to be a games designer, thanks very much. Construction, that's nothing to do with you. Tell them what to do. You know, meet these children and say, actually, we're hugely digital. We're doing some of the coolest stuff in games design. You know, well, games engines, rather. We're using games engines to do visualizations, augmented reality, virtual reality. We are it. Nobody's better than the built environment for doing all this digital stuff. The kids don't know about it. So the key thing is, you know, get into schools and tell them who we are and what we do.
So yeah, okay. So basically, it's a combination of things. So with this program as well, it's about getting the big sort of clients involved to expand the reach, and also getting the contractors involved. But it's about, you know, the contractors and the other sort of consultants sort of getting into the schools and saying, this is what we do. I'm just conscious of time, and I know we've overrun, so I am going to pass back to Catherine to wrap things up. Thanks so much, Alison. You've been fantastic, as I knew you would be. I think because Catherine will be writing up the article after this, I think we definitely need the call to action in there to sort of say, right, you know, this is what we need from industry. We need to be getting the messages out there. So we'll do all we can to support your cause. And thanks again for sharing your experiences and fantastic knowledge.
No problem, anytime.
Thank you, Maria, and thank you, Alison. Thank you so much for joining us today, and I hope everybody listening has really got something to take away from today's call. I've been tweeting like mad as Alison's been talking, because there's just some incredible, really important messages in there that we need to get out there and share. As I said, we will try and persuade Alison to share some of that material that she had up on the screen up on our Facebook page. I will be doing a write-up of this call, and it will also be up as a podcast and up on YouTube. Give me a couple of days, but it'll probably be up by Tuesday next week. If you've got any questions, things in the meantime, please do share them on Facebook or on Twitter. Both of those are Be the Action, and we look forward to talking again on the 9th of June. That's Friday, the 9th of June, is our next Be the Action call. Thank you again to Alison and to Maria, and hope to speak to you all soon. Thanks again. Bye.
Thank you.